Tonight's debate is a discussion between two of the leading economic thinkers about Europe. Both of them, Roger Bootle and Hugo Dixon, have written challenging books about Europe and Britain's place in it. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, the impact on business, the impact on the country as a whole. Welcome. Delighted you could be here for this excellent event this evening. Let us start off perhaps with Roger outlining what his book's about and the case that it presents.
Let me start off with what I hope will be a fairly non-contentious point. Don't worry, I won't carry on in that vein. First of all, I think the EU was constructed from a very noble vision. Let me also say that I'm not one of those mad Eurosceptics who believe that everything that's wrong is down to the EU. Now, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this evening, it's this. The EU, or the countries in the EU, are a comparative economic failure. If you measure the performance of the EU as an economic bloc over about the last 20-25 years, you find that it's done very badly. Relative to the United States, relative to Canada, relative to Australia, relative to Switzerland, relative to the semi-detached ones like us. Now, why is that? First of all, a series of absolutely daft decisions. They emanate from the very nature of the EU. The second reason is the diversion of energies into stupid things. And the last reason why the EU has done badly is that it smothers competition between governments. You let government out off the hook. You don't compete with government, and what you get is monopoly government. You hear a lot about the idea that we've got to be in the single market. We mustn't shut the door on our most important market. These metaphors are very interesting because leaving the EU isn't about shutting the door. What is the essential nature of the EU now? Well, I think it's moving towards an integrated state, and indeed I don't see how it's possible for it to survive in its current form unless it does make that journey. I decided to take part in this discussion at the IOD because I thought it might be fun. I was quite sure you'd get a good audience, which you did. I was pretty sure that they would be on the whole Europhile, which they were, and I like a challenge.
I certainly, just as Roger is not a rabid Eurosceptic, I'm not a rabid Europhile. I do not try to pretend that everything in the EU is good, because it clearly isn't. And the disaster of the euro that Roger mentioned is clearly very bad. But I've got news for you. We're not part of the euro. We hear a lot of nonsense about how EU immigrants are stealing our jobs and stealing our benefits. The truth is that most of these immigrants who come here, they are young, but they've already been educated at their own country's expense, and many of them go home before they get old and before they therefore become a burden on the National Health Service. So it's a good deal for us, and the academic studies show that it's a good deal. But the main argument, the main economic argument to stay in the EU is that it gives us full access to the single market. Now, Roger said, oh, it's a load of bunkum to say that we're going to lose access or something like that to the single market, which of course is true. But we would lose full access. And that is where the intelligent debate on this issue is centered. There are some industries which still suffer tariff barriers if you're not part of the single market. Secondly, our financial services industry gets what's known as a passport, which means that so long as it's regulated appropriately in the UK, it can offer its services right across the whole of the single market. My view is our membership is valuable. We have a great chance to make it better, and all the alternatives are worse. As this debate gathers pace, what business people think will be one of the factors that will help influence the wider populace. And so having the opportunity to talk to directors at the IOD really matters.
Do you see the EU getting worse to the point that you could say that actually it's continuing down the path, which means that we should leave?
I find it difficult to believe anything other than that the interferences, the bad decisions, are going to get worse in answer to your question. But I wouldn't argue that at the moment the burden is overwhelming.
I disagree with Roger that the EU is going to be charging down the road of political and fiscal union. They are not going to form a European superstate because the people of Europe do not want a European superstate. It is not just in the UK that we've got Eurosceptic parties.
The only way the Eurozone will survive in any reasonable form is for the inner group to form themselves into a fiscal union.
Is that not a solution in many ways to the debate?
The good thing for us is we're not part of the Eurozone, but we are part of the single market, and we are therefore in a position to benefit as they come down the line and are forced to liberalise their markets because of the straitjacket of the Eurozone. That's actually playing right into the agenda that the UK has for many years been advocating for Europe.
I think this vision is fundamentally wrong for the future of Europe. I rate it as an error on a par with the formation of the Soviet Union in 1917.
What would each panelist's position be if one of the EU countries were to elect a fringe party, doesn't seem beyond reason, and that fringe party were to say, by the way, I'm tearing up the Growth and Stability Pact and I'm going to be spending as much money as I want, and the Germans were to say no, and the EU were thrown into some sort of constitutional crisis?
In this era, what really counts is not geography and proximity, it's culture. Culture and institutions. And if the institutions of the people that are next door to you don't work, you shouldn't join them.
No one's mentioned the cost to the UK economy that we put into the EU. And I would suggest that while we talk about the European, I would think the Europeans need our market as much as we need them.
If we left, they want to do trade on their terms. And if we said, no, we're going to do trade with you on our terms, we would not actually have a very strong negotiating position.
The one thing we know from IOD members is they like immigration. The country may not, but our members absolutely value and appreciate immigrants.
I think that in many ways immigration has been a substantial benefit to the UK. However, there are bigger issues here about public services, about this question of identity.
No, I mean, some people sort of, they say, is it going to be fought on the head or is it going to be fought on the heart? And I think it'll be fought on both. And you have to look at Scotland. I mean, Scotland, it was fought on both. And ultimately, if you like to think of economic arguments being the head arguments, they did win through narrowly.
Thank you very much to our two speakers, and buy their book before you leave. Thank you.
I'm very interested in the debate that's going on in the UK at the moment about whether UK should stay in or leave the EU at some stage.
And I found the arguments very good on both sides. It's made me think, which is really the idea of the whole evening.
The only reason for leaving seems to be to control immigration, which I don't think is so important.
My philosophy has always been, you can never change things from the outside. You have to be in there to try and change it.